Everything in war is very simple, but the simplest thing is difficult. So, in war, it is difficult for normal efforts to achieve even moderate results. History has always recorded a nation's battles and wars in minute detail. Battles and maneuvers from the times of Alexander to Genghis Khan, Shivaji to Napoleon, Ranjit Singh to Rommel, Patton and Guderian have been exceedingly pored over so as to be able virtually to reenact the event of that era. Attributes for success and reasons for failure were identified and lessons drawn up. With progress of technology, weapons evolved and war-fighting methods changed. However, certain aspects remain quite literally constant. On these constants, the principles of war were propounded. With minor modifications, these have remained applicable in the wars in the post-modern era. India's national policy has always been non-confrontational with emphasis on resolving issues diplomatically through dialogue and negotiations. Despite India's morbid aversion for employment of hard power in pursuit of national interests and protect its territorial integrity, India has been drawn into a number of major conflicts by its belligerent neighbors. Jammu and Kashmir in 1947 to 48, Hyderabad in September 1948, liberating Goa in 1961, Chinese debacle in 1962, Indo-Pak War in 1965, liberation of Bangladesh in 1971, 1987 to 89, Operation Pawan, the Kargil War in 1999, and 2001 to 2's Operation Parakram. On the face of it, Indian Army is battle-hardened force. Therefore, it becomes imperative to draw useful lessons from its redoubtable experience to further hone individual skills and operational techniques and to be prepared for any future contingency when the army will be called in to defend the country's territory and its cherished core values. Even the Air Force and the Navy will assist the Indian Army in all sort of operations. Hello and welcome to SSB Crack Exams. I am Hemant and I wish each and every aspirant who is watching this a very happy Independence Day. Today, we will discuss in very much detail about the wars fought by India after independence and what all things did we take up from all of these important wars, the important lessons and the important diplomatic and military changes that have seen in all of these things. SSB Crack Exams is India's largest, most preferred online defense exams preparation portal. We are one-stop solution for you if you are preparing for various defense examinations like NDA, CDS, AFCAT, INET, Territorial Army and Indian Air Force, Airman Group X and Group Y. I highly recommend you to follow us on all social media platforms and please download our Android app from Google Play Store where you can have each and every defense-related information, all sort of informative content in your hands. In this particular session, I will be discussing with you about these most important wars. They include the wars with China and Pakistan. These are the only two nations we have ever had wars with. So first I will discuss with you about the wars with Pakistan in detail. Then I will discuss with you about the wars with China. And all the important list of wars that I am going to discuss include the first Kashmir War of 1947 to 48, the Sino-Indian War of 1962, the Indo-Pak War of 1965, the Sino-Indian War of 1967, the Indo-Pak War of 1971, and also finally a few points about the Kargil War of 1999. So let us begin with the first and foremost about the first Indo-Pak War of 1947 to 48. Now, we have to understand the background that this war has. As a result of the territorial claims of India and Pakistan over Jammu and Kashmir, this particular war broke out. We have to understand that this particular war is about the princely state of Jammu and Kashmir. We had the Indian Independence Act of 1947, which actually said that any princely state that was formerly a part of the British Raj has complete choice of being independent or join any of the dominions of either India or Pakistan. That means, according to the Indian Independence Act of 1947, if in case there are any other princely states still also always at that point of time, then they had the liberty and they had the freedom to either join the Indian dominion or join the Pakistan dominion or might remain their own important territories. They can remain their independent territories itself. So in that way, there were three main territories who were all the way up to this time. They include the Junagadh, okay. Then we also had the Kashmir and we had the Hyderabad. Junagadh, Kashmir and Hyderabad were three most important princely states that did not allow and they did not want to join either Indian side or the Pakistani side, where they remained independent territories. However, the Hyderabad was annexed later, Junagadh was also annexed by India, but Kashmir was taken up into our own country, wherein which the Kashmir's king Maharaja Hari Singh has signed the document of accession and joined India. Now we have to understand that this particular war is only based upon the Kashmir issue. Okay, Maharaja Hari Singh was a Hindu ruler of the Dogra dynasty. He ruled the Muslim majority of the then Kashmir. Understanding, when I am speaking about Muslim majority, then I am telling you that around 3/5 of the population of that time was Muslims. Okay, another 2/5 were Hindus and other important religious people. Okay, so 3/5 of the population was Muslim, and a Hindu ruler was ruling this particular Muslim majority state. Okay, now what happened next? Hari Singh, he chose to remain independent and was away from both the dominions of India and Pakistan until Pakistan aggressively entered his territory in a bid to capture it. Understanding? Now we will also get to know why Pakistan tried to invade Kashmir and enthusiasm to capture the Kashmir. Unable to retaliate, Maharaja Hari Singh sought the help of our country, which is India. Nehru made it clear that Indian troops would fight the war only if Kashmir can be declared an Indian territory. It is very, very simple and common sense that if some territory is not under your own territory, it is not your territory, why would you go and wage a war and you fight a war? Because it is not your own territory. For us to get participate in the war of Kashmir, it is very much important that the Kashmir must be annexed by India and the Kashmir's territory also must be declared as a part of the Indian territory. Only then the Indian armed forces might go and it might help the Maharaja Hari Singh. So Maharaja Hari Singh, without having any choice, he signed the document of accession to our own country. So he made his ultimate choice that he would join India on October of 2nd, 1948. We have to remember this date so that his people will be saved. Understanding about this particular issue, a document of accession was signed on the day and whole Kashmir was officially transferred to India based on few conditions posed by Hari Singh. When I am telling you, please remember, whole Kashmir was officially transferred to India based on few conditions posed by Hari Singh. Respecting the views of the king, Nehru and his cabinet made arrangements for special articles to be kept under Indian constitution and Kashmir be declared a state of India with autonomous status. Now let us understand why Pakistan tried to invade the Kashmir. This is a very important point for us to remember. Pakistan has an important theory known as a two-nation theory which was propounded by Muhammad Ali Jinnah and various other important Muslim national leaders at that time. So two-nation theory was maintained that as long as two ethnic groups existed in British India under British rule, namely Hindus and Muslims, then it was logical that two nations be created. This is the main agenda behind the two-nation theory. That means it simply says that as long as the Hindu majority country and the Muslim majority country, there are two different kinds of dominions, two different ethnic groups, then we have to create two different separate nations. Now, a multi-ethnic nation like Pakistan needed a principle to unify the people. Understanding? The Pakistan itself was a multi-ethnic nation. Now they had a problem of getting their own country getting divided into various other important nations. So in that way, it should to make its own two-nation theory to work out. They needed a principle to unify the people. Otherwise, there was a risk of the new nation being splitting up. That is why they envisaged the two-nation theory, and the main aim was that because the 3/5 of the people in Kashmir are Muslims and Pakistan is a Muslim country, Pakistan want to accede the whole Kashmir territory and make that Kashmir into their own hands. This was the main reason behind the Kashmir's accession. What happened next? That India's view has been ethnic homogeneity. When I am telling you about ethnic homogeneity, India does not have any sort of differences or any sorts of discrimination towards any ethnicities or religion or culture. Each and every ethnicity, culture will be maintained and all the cultures will be following the important principles of unity in diversity. Okay, unity in diversity is a binding principle that our own country is still following as of now. So secularism is our principle at that time, and it simply means that governance has nothing to do with the religion. That is why Indian diplomacy maintains a respect of individual dignity coupled with patriotic fervor. Above all, Kashmir is our territory since we have the document of accession. Going on with the details of the war, this war started in October of 1947 and it ended at December of 1948 and it lasted for around 1 year, 2 months. It was a very large war. This war was terminated by a ceasefire resolution of United Nations Security Council on January of 1st, 1949. A special important group was set up that mediates between India and Pakistan regarding these issues, and United Nations Security Council UNSC has made an important ceasefire resolution regarding this. So the ceasefire established the ceasefire line in order to divide Kashmir into areas controlled by India and Pakistan respectively. So we have to understand that the areas, the POK and important areas like COK, all of these we will going to discuss in a very much detailed way. Okay. So now let us understand about the second Indo-Pakistani war. After the first Pakistan's war, Indians have sort of understood what Pakistan wants, and it was very much important on our side to secure our own territories and borders, especially the important Kashmir areas and all. So this wars, if we go through the period of this particular war, the second Indo-Pak war started on April 8th of 1965 and it ended on September 23rd of 1965, and it was around 5 months to 15 days. 5 months and 15 days was the duration of the second Indo-Pakistani war. Although United Nations has strong calls in the form of resolution for a ceasefire put an end to the military clashes between India and Pakistan, no measures were taken for a lasting ceasefire. Understanding? And that is the main reason why this war broke out in 1965. It was then the Soviet Union served as an intermediary. Okay. What after next? When Soviet Union came, then we had an important agreement known as the Tashkent Agreement. After further complications, an India-Pakistan summit meeting was held in Tashkent. After further complications, an India-Pakistan summit was held at Tashkent, which in the southern part of the Soviet Union from January of 4th, 1966. Prime Minister at that time, our own Prime Minister was Shri Lal Bahadur Shastri ji, and the Pakistani President Ayub Khan have attended from India and Pakistan respectively, and from the Russian side, Kosygin has acted as a mediator. Premier Kosygin. So the meeting concluded on January of 10th and Tashkent Declaration was adopted on January of 11th. This is a very important point for us to know. But unfortunate thing is, after a few days after signing the Tashkent Agreement, Lal Bahadur Shastri has left us and he died. Going on with the important details regarding the Tashkent Agreement and what all things it said, we have to remember this one. The Tashkent Declaration that leaders agreed to, among other things, which include settle the disputes between the two countries peacefully without recourse to force in accordance with the United Nations Charter, withdraw the military forces of the two countries no later than February of 25, 1966 to the positions they held at the outbreak of war on August of 5th, 1965 and hold discussions between the two countries for the settlement of the disputes. These were the main reasons of the main statements of the Tashkent Agreement. But the things that we have to understand that this agreement was also failed. Now we have to understand why did Tashkent Agreement fail. One of the main features of the Tashkent Declaration is that it makes no reference to the Kashmiri dispute on one way and the cause of the Indo-Pakistani war, because if you see this particular agreement, it simply says two countries will settle disputes peacefully, but it did not say which particular dispute it was mentioning about, and also it said to withdraw the military forces of the two countries no later than February 25, 1966. Now when it mentioned withdrawing of the military forces, did it mention withdrawing of the military forces as a time when it was before 1947 or as a time at that point of time was it before 1962? This particular most important point we have to understand and remember. Okay. Also, measures to realize a permanent peace were not taken under the declaration. Declaration was no more than a temporary compromise. Understanding? And it is clearly proven by the fact that the third Indo-Pakistani war broke out just 5 years later. Now, what all things that we have to understand in another way is that by arranging a diplomacy between India and Pakistan, Russia had a diplomatic victory. Understanding? Now, we have to understand at that time when United Nations was formed, United States was the leading important confronting nation that was very much famous in all the other countries all around the globe. But at this time, Russia made a very smart move by mediating between India and Pakistan. This is a very famous issue for it to consider. United States was occupied with Vietnam War at that time. Furthermore, it faced worsening relations with Pakistan. Britain also at that time, it had no longer had capabilities to exercise its influence in South Asia. Through the adoption of Tashkent Declaration, Soviet Union not only succeeded in expanding its influence in South Asia, but also simultaneously weakened the influence of Pakistan on China. Okay. Now we have to understand about the third Indo-Pakistani war of 1971 that took place 5 years after the Tashkent Declaration. Duration of Indo-Pakistani war was from 3rd December 1971 to 16th of December 1971. It was just around 14 days for us to remember. This war is known as the Bangladesh Liberation War. Prime Minister Indira Gandhi was considering the ejection of Pakistani army and air force from southern Azad Kashmir and liberating it, because at that time in southern Azad Kashmir, wherever the areas were there, she had an idea to completely remove the Pakistani army and slowly completely take over the Kashmir into her own consideration. That means we have to take on the complete Kashmir to our own side. But United States deployed the 7th Fleet to Bay of Bengal to prevent India's attack against West Pakistan. Okay, now United States is deployed in the Bay of Bengal, so this was a very stronger one for us to consider. Another issue that we have to remember that how it went about that international sources considered the beginning of war to have Operation Chengiz Khan, which was launched by Pakistan, where it launched preemptive air strikes on 11 Indian air bases on 3rd of December 1971. After a lot of issues, on 16th of December 1971, a document of surrender was signed by Pakistan and 93,000 Paki soldiers were made prisoners of war. This was a great victory from our side to consider. Okay, even today, whenever the Pakistanis say that they are very much stronger than us, we showed this particular picture, very, very simple, that at that time, you people, around 93,000 Pakistani soldiers were made prisoners of war. This simply indicates how strong India is. Mukti Bahini was there at that time. It was completely had a idea to liberate all the Pakistani forces from the Bangladesh and to create its own independent Bangladesh country. So Mukti Bahini joined hands with Indian armed forces along with the armed forces of India. It crushed the Pakistan. Now what happened next? That India successfully destroyed much of the Karachi along with PNS Ghazni, PNS Khyber, PNS Muhafiz, PNS Shah Jahan, and all of these Pakistan naval ships were completely attacked. 7 gunboats were also attacked, and India has launched Operation Python and Operation Trident. Both of them were declared extremely successful. INS Vikrant at that time was a very important aircraft carrier. It played a very, very important role in the war along with some frigates, destroyers and submarines. Indian Air Force took over the control of Dhaka as it destroyed the air base controlled by the Pakistan. All of these are very, very diplomatic and strategic military victories that we had at that time. What happened next? We signed the Shimla Agreement. This was a very important agreement. According to this particular agreement, the Pakistan has surrendered itself to our own country. Pakistan declared itself that it was completely defeated in the hands of India. Pakistani military suffered further humiliation by having 90,000 prisoners of war released by India only after negotiation and signing of the Shimla Agreement on 2nd of July 1972. Okay, Pakistan at this time, it lost half of its navy, it lost quarter of its air force and a third of its army. This was a big victory that we have on our side. Both China and USA supported Pakistan politically and materially, but our old ally Russia has openly supported India and vetoed the resolution of USA to draw a ceasefire between India and Pakistan in United Nations Security Council. It stands out clearly that even while government is involved in dialogue and discussions, it must warn the armed forces to be prepared for an eventuality to deploy adequate force for any task if talks fail. Had this been done, more forces could have been pre-positioned near Jammu and to be inducted by road and for an airlift to Srinagar from probably Jalandhar, which would have generated more sorties per day than by the induction process from Delhi. While the Kashmir dispute is certainly a territorial dispute between India and Pakistan, it also has aspects of domestic political issue for both countries. The fact which is important above all is that the two countries are multi-ethnic nations and that the Kashmir dispute has directly influenced the respective countries' ethnic issues and national unity. This precisely forms the crux of the Kashmir dispute, a dispute that is more than traditional bilateral conflict over territories and borders. Now we will understand about the famous heroes, the Paramveer Chakra recipients of all the 3 important Kashmir wars. The wars with the Pakistan, we must include the first and foremost recipient of the Paramveer Chakra, Major Somnath Sharma. He repulsed Pakistani infiltrators near Srinagar airport and he exhibited gallantry and sacrifice in the Battle of Budgam during Indo-Pak War of 1947. Next comes the second Lieutenant Rama Raghoba Rane for his actions on 8th of April 1948 during the advance to Rajouri in Jammu and Kashmir during Indo-Pak War of 1947. He is the first living recipient of Paramveer Chakra. Next comes the Lance Naik Karam Singh. He saved a forward post at Richmar Gully south of Titwal during Indo-Pak War of 1947. Naik Jadunath Singh for his actions on 6th of February 1948 at Tain Dhar to the north of Naushehra. Company Havaldar Major Piru Singh Shekhawat, who alone fought when all the leading section of his company that was assigned to capture a Pakistani post at Titwal, he was martyred there. Then comes Company Quartermaster Havaldar Abdul Hamid. He was at the Battle of Asalutar on 9 to 10 September 1965. Hamid destroyed 6 Pakistani tanks and was killed during an engagement with the 7th one. Lieutenant Colonel A.B. Tarapur, he led the 17-horse regiment in several tank battles in Sialkot sector between 11 and 16 September and was killed in one of such battle at Butur Dograndi on 16th of September. Under his leadership, the regiment destroyed around 60 Pakistani tanks. Next comes 2nd Lieutenant Arun Khitarpal, was martyred in action in the Battle of Basantar in the battlefield of Shakargarh during the Indo-Pakistan War of 1971, where his actions earned him his honor. Now we have to understand about the Sino-Indian War of 1962, because as of now we were discussing about the wars with Pakistan in a very detailed way. I will also discuss with you about the Kargil conflict in the end, but we have to understand some of the important issues regarding the Chinese one. This particular war has its duration from October 20 to November 21 of 1962. This dispute traces back to the drawing of the McMahon Line, and this border was demarcated by Britain and Tibet at Shimla Convention, held from 1913 to 1914, when Britain, China and Tibet were there in Shimla. Okay, so Britain's side was represented by Sir Henry McMahon, and thus the line that was drawn was named after him. So China has not acknowledged the McMahon line on the grounds that Chinese Kuomintang government, which was China's government at the time, did not sign the treaty, and India claims it to be a border until now. This was the main important issue that we have to remember. Until as of now, all of these areas were the areas held by the China after the Chinese War, Indo-Chinese War in 1962. Then comes the disputed areas. These are the disputed borders, and all of these areas were said to be the complete Arunachal state is said to be the disputed, largely claimed by the China side. Now we have to understand why is China claiming all of these issues and what all things does it have on its own side's explanation, and then I will also tell you on how India is every time correct and in detailing in maintaining its borders and territorial interests and integrity in a very detailed way. Going through the Sino-Indian War of 1962, consequently, after this particular line was drawn, we have to remember that this was the McMahon line that was drawn, and all of these red painted areas were those areas that China felt that all of these areas are its own areas, and these were taken into the British territory, into the Indian territory as far as the McMahon line is drawn. So consequently, regarding this particular McMahon line, Arunachal Pradesh state and Aksai Chin area and northwestern Kashmir have become the most important disputed areas even until today. McMahon line is said to have expanded the part of British India in this area northward and pushed its frontier out 60 miles towards Tibet. As a result of this expansion, Tawang was also incorporated into British India. Now, there was also an illegal transfer. You can see this important red area. All of this red area is actually a part of India. It's actually a part of Kashmir. But this was actually at that time, the whole area that is mentioned here is a completely Pakistan occupied Kashmir. All of these areas. So these are very important points. So this important area was acceded to China by Pakistan illegally. Now we have to understand that this was a part of the Trans-Karakoram Tract. It was in northern Kashmir and is a disputed area between India and China. In other words, Sino-Pakistan agreement was signed on March of 2nd, 1963. On this day, China and Pakistan have signed an agreement, and according to this, Pakistan transferred the control over this area to China, this red area to China, with the condition that the transfer would be effective only until the settlement of the Kashmir dispute. That means the complete Kashmir has to come towards the Pakistani side, only then this particular transfer would be considered effective. But this will never going to be happen. This is never going to be happen. So this is what we have to understand. India has lodged protests with both countries on the same day and still claims area as an Indian territory. This is the trueness. Okay, now we have to understand the role of the Cuban Missile Crisis and the main reason behind all of this. See, you have to understand why did China think about talking about all of these border issues only in 1962. There is a doubt, no? Because we got our independence in the year of 1947. We already had few wars with Pakistan. What was China doing all of these days? Was it sleeping? No, it was not sleeping. What happened was, the main reason behind it is about the Cuban Missile Crisis was also there. Some people speculate that even Cuban Missile Crisis was an important issue, and behind this is the main reason behind why China tried to attempt on illegally taking the Indian territories on its own side in this particular year. This we have to understand. Now, India-China war is closely interrelated with Cuban Missile Crisis, which actually happened on October 14 to 28 of 1962. At the risk of oversimplification, it could even be suggested that India-China war would not have occurred that the Cuban Missile Crisis had not taken place. Now, what is actually the Cuban Missile Crisis? See, this is USA. Here is an important island known as Cuba. What happened was Russia had a plan to completely acquire. It has a plan to wage a war with USA. At that time, it had its own military bases. It has its own important missiles that were all stationed up in the Cuban island. Okay, so this was a very, very important mind-blowing attempt that was made by Russia to counter the USA at that point of time. During the Cuban Missile Crisis, the leaders of the US and the Soviet Union engaged in a tense 13-day political and military standoff in October 1962 over the installation of nuclear-armed Soviet missiles on Cuba just 90 miles from United States shores. In a TV address on October 22, President at that time John F. Kennedy had notified Americans about the presence of missiles, explained his decision to enact a naval blockade around Cuba, and made it clear to the United States was prepared to use military force if necessary to neutralize this perceived threat to the national security. Following this news, many people feared the world was on brink of nuclear war. However, disaster was so avoided within the US agreed to Soviet leader Nikita Khrushchev's offer to remove the Cuban missiles in exchange for the US promising not to invade Cuba. Kennedy also secretly agreed to remove United States missiles from Turkey. Now that the whole world was watching only behind the Cuban Missile Crisis and the tensions that were there between USA and Russia, at that time China thought that this is the right time to invade India, because at that time people won't be realizing, people won't take the China and India's issues very, very seriously, and in the meantime it wants to completely take up the Indian territories on its own sides. When Premier Zhou Enlai visited India in 1960, he informally proposed a barter deal to India in which India would possess Arunachal Pradesh state in return for China's possession of Aksai Chin. The barter deal fell through, however, because India claimed sovereignty over both regions. Additionally, from November 1961, India began to carry out its forwarding policy, a policy of establishing forward military posts across McMahon Line on the Chinese side. In the light of these developments, China waged the India-China war, anticipating that the world's attention would be fixed on Cuba as a result of worsening United States-Soviet relations due to the Soviet Union's construction of missile sites in Cuba. China registered a strong protest against India because the latter recognized the Dalai Lama's domestic exile in India after the Tibet uprising. Further still, the Prime Minister Nehru's non-alignment movement garnering worldwide praise, it is possible that China attempted to seize this opportunity to deal a blow against this development. The Soviet Union notified China about its missile site construction, partly to secure Chinese support before the United States and the Soviet Union clashed and possibly even went to war over the Cuban dispute. Where there were signs that China-Soviet relationship were deteriorating around this time, the Soviet Union attached importance to gaining China's endorsement. In India, on the other hand, Prime Minister Nehru and other government leaders had absolute faith in friendly India-China relations, despite their awareness that the bilateral relationship was gradually worsening following the Tibet uprising. Not even in their wildest dreams did they think that China would invade India. Neither did India ever envision that the forwarding policy it was undertaking on this basis would invite Chinese retaliation. While Prime Minister Nehru acknowledged Chinese territory over Tibet, he expected a Chinese policy that would grant a degree of autonomy to Tibet. The difference in views between India and China over their border cannot be overlooked. China regarded its border with India as an issue involving Tibet and viewed Arunachal Pradesh state and Aksai Chin through the prism of Tibet. In contrast, while India discerned that Tibet issue was intertwined with bilateral border conflict, all India wished was for Tibet to serve as a buffer area between the two countries, similar to the period between British-ruled India. The fact that China staged the India-China war based on Mao Zedong's concept can also be inferred from the fact that China asked India for a ceasefire in late October, just as the Cuban Missile Crisis was approaching its termination. At any event, the India-China border conflict left a negative impression on India, namely the perception that China betrayed Prime Minister Nehru, who believed in the India-China friendship. Now, after all of these wars, you have to understand about the India's stand and the global scenarios as of now. As regards to the termination of any future war with India, which may be involved, two new factors have to be considered. First, that the development of India is now a major power. Since the Cold War, especially since 2000s, Indian foreign policy has been implemented at three levels: global level, regional level, and sub-regional level, with a view to becoming a major world power. During the Cold War period, India was at most a major power in South Asia. Today, it is a major power in Asia and has its sights set on becoming a major world power in future. India is now a de facto nuclear state and is strengthening its economic and military powers. India today perceives itself completely different from the way it did in the Cold War period, and it is beginning to seek a different positioning by other countries. As a result, the start and termination of a future war will likely to take a different form than during the Cold War period. In other words, it is very much possible that as India develops into a major power, the termination of any war with India may be involved will have the aspects of considerably different from those of the old periods. The second important point that we have to remember is that China or Pakistan will likely take up a potential advisory in any future involving with India. That means even today. And we have to understand that since 1960s, China and Pakistan have rapidly deepened their relationship, which has become to be called an all-weather relationship. In any war against China or Pakistan, it is expected that India will have to constantly calculate the moves of both countries, both in early and the last stages. Let us now take the names and feel proud of all of these Paramveer Chakra recipients that took part in the wars with China, the two wars with China, which include Lieutenant Colonel Dhan Singh Thapa, who was Srija. One was a post established on northern bank of Pangong Lake by the 1st Battalion of 8 Gorkha Rifles, and he was commanding there. Okay, so soon the post was surrounded by better armed Chinese forces. Major Thapa and his men held the post and repelled 3 attacks before eventually being overrun, and he gave his life there. So this is very important and a great, important, exemplary gallantry that was performed by Lieutenant Colonel Dhan Singh Thapa. Next comes about Subedar Joginder Singh Sainin. During 1962 Sino-Indian War, he was commanding a platoon at Bumla Pass in Northeast Frontier Agency. Though heavily outnumbered, he led his troops against a Chinese assault and defended his post until he was wounded and captured. He died from injuries while he was in the Chinese custody. The next important hero was Major Shaitan Singh Bhati. It was during 1962 Sino-Indian War where 13th Battalion of Kumaon Regiment was stationed in Chushul sector under the command of Singh was holding a position at Rizang La, and in the morning hours of 18th of November, the Chinese attacked initially from front but later from rear too. He continuously moved from post to post, reorganizing the defenses and boosting the morale of his men. As he moved between the posts without any cover, he was seriously wounded and later succumbed to the injuries. The next important, we have to remember about the Kargil conflict at now. Kargil conflict took place in the year of 1999. Okay, army launched Operation Vijay as a response to the Pakistan's Operation Badr. Okay, Pakistan has launched Operation Badr in a bid to attempt completely capture the Kargil area and also the Siachen Glacier and all of those issues. So it had launched Operation Badr. So in a bid to completely repulse the Operation Badr, Indian Army has launched Operation Vijay. Okay, so Indian Air Force has launched Operation Safed Sagar, which was later launched by Indian Air Force. So this was in support of the Operation Vijay. Okay, in the Operation Safed Sagar, there were around 3,427 transport aircraft sorties, 2,474 helicopter sorties, 1,780 fighter sorties. Each of them include around completely of around more than 7,000 sorties have been flown in this particular important operation. At this time, the logistics was less, and the other thing that we have to remember is that there were very less number of airfields. So making these many number of sorties is a very tremendously Herculean task, but Indian Air Force was successful in doing this. This war saw the first large-scale use of air power in the history of Indian armed forces. Understanding there were in a total of around 1,199 different types of sorties that were flown by the Indian Air Force in the Kargil conflict. So we have to understand what actually happened at the Indian Kargil conflict. There were initial infiltrations were noticed in Kargil at that time in the May of 1999. So it was a common practice for both Indian and Pakistani forces to abandon the forward posts during this time, and due to extreme weather conditions, these posts would be reoccupied in spring. Understanding? Now at the coming spring, from the coming spring time, that means in winter it was very very difficult for both the sides to maintain border at that time. So they simply go back and they simply vacate the important positions, but they will come back in spring. But the coming spring, Pakistan army occupied Indian post 2 in a bid to capture Kashmir. Now what happened next? Planned by various commanders and headed by Army Chief General Ved Prakash Malik, our army has mobilized around 2 lakh Indian troops along with several thousand from the paramilitary forces of India. Intruders were found to be well entrenched, and while artillery attacks had produced results in only few areas, so remote areas needed the help of Air Force. Wherever they need the help, Air Force was present there. We have to understand about the number 7 squadron of Indian Air Force that was there in action at that time. On 30th of May 1999, Mirage 2000 aircrafts were taken into action and armed with many bombs. This squadron flew over 3 days, struck infiltrators in Munto Dhalo, Tiger Hill, points 4388 and 5140. These were 4 most important areas that were majorly possible for us to declare the victory on our side. So these strikes destroyed completely logistics and resupply capabilities of enemy in the Batalic sector. Tiger Hill was completely heavily protected and defended by Indian Air Force. Now, also that Israelis have even provided 100 laser-guided bomb kits to our own Indian military, and Air Force chose to make maximum use of these to retaliate the Pakistani bunkers. Also that aircrafts have operated 10,000 feet above ground level, well out of the man-portable air defense systems. At last, in 11th of July 1999, Indian troops have recaptured all the key points in the Batalic sector, and on 14th of July 1999, Prime Minister at that time, Shri Atal Bihari Vajpayee ji, has declared both Operation Vijay and Safed Sagar a success. Indian government set the conditions for the talks with Pakistan, and on 26th of July 1999, Kargil conflict officially comes to an end. Indian Army announces complete withdrawal of Pakistan regular and irregular troops. It is on 26th of July every year we celebrate the Kargil Vijay Divas. Okay. So these are very very important points for us to remember. Now let us try to remember some of the most important heroes of the Kargil operation. They include Captain Manoj Kumar Pandey. He was posthumously awarded India's highest military honor for his audacious courage and leadership during Kargil war. He was an officer of the 1st Battalion of 11 Gorkha Rifles, and he was killed in action during the attack on the Jubar top of Khalubar Hills in Batalic sector of Kargil. Even today, he is a great inspiration to millions of Indian defense aspirants. The next important person is about Captain Vikram Batra. He was awarded for his various actions in Kargil war. Next comes the rifleman Sanjay Kumar. He is still alive and he has been awarded the Paramveer Chakra for displaying the most conspicuous gallantry, cool courage and devotion to duty of an exceptionally high order in the face of an enemy. And next comes about the Grenadier Yogendra Singh Yadav. He is awarded PVC for his action during Kargil war, and he was just awarded this particular war at the age of just 19 years and is the youngest recipient of the Paramveer Chakra. It is often said that armies are training and preparing to fight the last war but end up confronted with a war they had not visualized and which is wholly different. If that were to be true, then why bother to draw and learn lessons of the last war when the course and construct of the future was unfathomable? Well, the simple answer to that is that at least the earlier mistakes will not be repeated. Armies find it easier to train for the last war than prepare for a future war. A deliberate and concerted effort requires to be put in by commanders at all levels to prevent cerebral calcification, wherein status quo finds favor. For more knowledgeable content and interesting information, subscribe to this channel, download our Android app from Google Play Store, and last but not the least, always stay safe, stay healthy, eat healthy food, and Jai Hind.